But on the night Michael Jackson died, someone at Neverland pressed a button. The security cameras went dark, every single one at the same moment. Within hours, the gates were bolted shut. The 2,700-acre estate, the most elaborate private property ever built in California, was sealed off from the world. His family didn't go back. His lawyers didn't go back. His children, who had grown up inside those walls, didn't go back. For years, Neverland sat in complete silence. And deep inside the main house, past the award cases, past the gilded hallways, there was a door that almost no one knew existed. What was behind it would change everything people thought they knew about him. Everyone has an opinion about Neverland. Most of them are wrong. The tabloids built a story and repeated it until it became fact. A grown man who refused to grow up. A billionaire who bought himself a theme park. They even gave him a nickname, Wacko Jacko, one Michael Jackson despised so deeply he reportedly left any room where he heard it spoken. But here is what that story misses entirely. Michael bought Neverland in 1988, the same year Thriller made him the most recognizable human alive. He could not walk into a restaurant. He could not sit in a cinema. He could not stand at a corner without security closing in, cameras appearing, strangers screaming his name. In one interview, he described his life outside Neverland as running. Always running. Through kitchens, through service exits, through underground car parks. Always one step ahead. Neverland was the one place on Earth where the cameras could not follow. So, he built inside it everything he had never been allowed to have. A private cinema, a Ferris wheel, a zoo, a candy shop stocked fresh every day, and at the center of it all, a flower clock the size of a swimming pool with hands made of living roses. He didn't build it to show off. He built it because he was a man who had been working since the age of 5 and had never, not once, been allowed to simply be a child. But there was a part of Neverland that almost no journalist, no documentary crew, and no invited guest ever reached. Deep inside the main house, past the rooms shown on television, there was a private corridor, narrow, unlit unless you knew the switch, and at the end of it, a locked door. Not his bedroom, not his studio, something else entirely. His longtime personal assistant described it as the place Michael went when he needed to disappear. Not from the world. He was always disappearing from the world, from himself. He would go in alone, sometimes for hours, and emerge either completely at peace or completely unreachable, sitting at dinner, answering questions, performing the act of being present while something behind his eyes had gone somewhere no one else could follow. Nobody understood why. Not while he was alive. In 2012, 3 years after his death, the estate authorized a full inventory of Neverland. The team expected a standard job, object by object, value by value. What they found was not that. The house had not decayed. Utilities were still running at the exact settings Michael had chosen. Certain lights had never been turned off. When they opened the locked door at the end of the private corridor, they stopped. The room did not look like storage. It looked like something built over years, in complete secret for an audience of one. The walls were covered floor to ceiling. Thousands of images, printed, laminated, pinned so close together that no surface showed through. Some in color, some black and white, some so old the paper had turned amber at the edges. Almost all of them showed the same thing. Children. Not in any disturbing way. Investigators confirmed this. What filled those walls was childhood itself. Children running through fields. Children laughing in backyards. Children sleeping. Paintings. Illustrations from old magazines. And pinned among all of it, placed with care, photographs of Michael Jackson himself, at 5, at 7, at 9, at 12. In every single image of himself on those walls he was performing. On stage, in a spotlight, in a recording studio with headphones too large for his head. Every other child on those walls was free. Michael, in every image of himself, was working. Along one wall there was a shelf. On it, a handwritten note from Princess Diana, framed behind glass, a small bronze statue of a child, and several first edition children's books, Peter Pan, The Little Prince, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, all annotated in Michael's handwriting, passages underlined, notes pressed into the margins. One copy of Peter Pan had a single sentence underlined so many times the ink had torn through the page. He was a boy who could not grow up. There was also a locked cabinet. Inside it, journals, not diaries, notebooks filled with writing, sketches, and taped clippings. The estate has never released their contents. But a member of the inventory team later described 2 pages she could not forget. On one page, Michael had written a single question, over and over, filling the entire sheet, the handwriting becoming more distressed toward the bottom. Why won't they just let me be who I am? On the facing page, a photograph of himself at 9 years old. On stage, in a spotlight so bright it bleached out everything around him. Beneath the photograph, in the same broken handwriting, one word: prisoner. The woman who found those journals sat in that room for a long time before she could stand up again. She had gone into Neverland expecting to catalog assets. She came out understanding something that no interview, no documentary, no trial had ever shown her. You walk in and you immediately understand what Michael Jackson was doing his entire life. He wasn't performing for the world. He was trying to get back to something the world had taken from him before he was old enough to know what it was. Most people grieve what they lose. Michael Jackson was grieving something he never had in the first place. Michael Jackson talked about his childhood in interviews. Not often, and never completely, but enough that the shape of it is documented. Joseph Jackson believed in one thing: results. His method was simple: practice every day, perform perfectly, fail, and face the consequences. The consequences were physical. Michael described this across multiple interviews over multiple decades. The belt, the hand, a father whose approval was always conditional on the next performance. What this installed in Michael before he could read was an equation that never left him. Perform well, and you are loved. Don't, and you aren't. He was 5 years old the first time he performed professionally. He had never, in the entire course of his life, been allowed to simply exist. In 2003, a documentary filmed over 8 months aired internationally. In it, Michael Jackson spoke honestly about his life, about Neverland, about children, about the loneliness behind everything. The world responded by destroying him. And what followed was a criminal trial lasting 5 months, 13 charges, an acquittal on every single count. But acquittals don't undo what public humiliation does to a person. Michael Jackson walked out of that courthouse not guilty of everything, and came out looking like a man who had survived something that had nonetheless killed a part of him. He never lived at Neverland again. The one place on earth where he didn't have to perform, where he didn't have to be watched, had become the most scrutinized address in America. The last refuge was gone. In his final years, Michael Jackson could not sleep. Decades of touring and night sessions had dismantled whatever natural rhythm he once had. By 50, his solution was Propofol, a surgical anesthetic administered through an IV that doesn't produce sleep so much as unconsciousness. He called it his milk. A doctor, paid by Michael, living in his house, gave it to him nightly. On the morning of June 25th, 2009, something went wrong. He was 50 years old, 51 days away from the opening night of his comeback tour, 50 concerts at the O2 Arena in London. He died in a rented house in Los Angeles, not at Neverland, not in the home he had built, in a borrowed bed, in a body pushed beyond what any body could sustain, in a city that had spent 20 years making him feel like a stranger. Neverland was sold in 2020. The flower clock made of living roses was dug up and replaced with grass. The train that Michael had built to circle his own land so he could ride through it without ever reaching a boundary was dismantled and auctioned in pieces. The Ferris wheel is gone. The zoo is gone. The private corridor still exists, but the door at the end of it has been removed. The walls where the photographs were pinned have been painted white, and the journals, the closest thing that exists to Michael Jackson's actual voice, unperformed and unfiltered, are sitting in boxes in a temperature-controlled storage facility in California. The estate has not confirmed whether they will ever be made public. There is a version of this story in which the room at Neverland doesn't change anything, and there is another version in which a 5-year-old boy was placed under a spotlight and told this was his life now, in which every record he broke and every crowd he moved went into building a single room where no one could reach him, in which the most famous person who ever lived spent 50 years trying to answer one question, the question written on that page, over and over until the handwriting fell apart. Why won't they just let me be who I am? The walls at Neverland are white now, the roses are gone. And somewhere in the dark, in a box no one has opened, a 9-year-old boy stands under a spotlight, still waiting to be let go. Tell me in the comments, do you think those journals should ever be made public? Or does Michael Jackson finally deserve the privacy the world never gave him when he was alive? Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with someone who thinks they already know the full story. Because after this, nobody does.